The other day I was flipping around on TV and I saw this news report.
Federal Reserve may be given more power to oversee financial markets if Congress approves a proposal that the Bush administration will unveil on Monday. The plan would give the Fed new authority to oversee all areas of the financial industry and to step in when the overall system is threatened. But Democrats in Congress are expected to push for greater regulation to prevent the kinds of practices that led to the current financial crisis.
And I thought to myself, that's the worst thing I can imagine happening in our country. So I started doing a little digging. Let's look at Henry Paulson. He's the Secretary of the Treasury. Paulson has quickly distinguished himself from his two predecessors in the Bush administration by formally identifying the wide gap between the richest and poorest Americans. What does this mean? Well, that statement in of itself was, I thought was kind of stupid. The divide between the richest and poorest. Isn't that the definition of rich and poor? Rich are rich and poor are poor. There's a big divide in between them. It's kind of retarded. So this is what distinguishes him from other people. Paulson, three immediate predecessors as CEO of Goldman Sachs, John Corzine, Stephen Friedman, and Robert Rubin, each left the company to serve in government. Oh, how wonderful. You know, because that's just what we need. We need more millionaires. We need more millionaires running this country because they know what's best, right? Because they're millionaires. It wasn't because a lot of them probably stepped on the neck of everyone that they could to get ahead. No, it wasn't because they were connected, because they went to Yale and Harvard and Princeton and a part of all these different little secret groups where they all call each other and pat each other in the back and pretend they're enemies like George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. No, so that's just wonderful. We got more corporatization of America. And there was another thing I was thinking. Paulson, this guy looks familiar, and I was playing around a little bit, and I thought, you know, I've seen this guy before. So here's a picture of Paulson, and now here's what I was thinking.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Okay, maybe that's a little mean, but you gotta admit, I mean, he does kind of look scary. It was either my choice between that or Young Frankenstein. I couldn't figure out which. This is from The Guardian. The Bush administration today set out a blueprint for a wholesale overhaul of America's financial regulation system, which proposes far-reaching new powers to the Federal Reserve to tackle potentially troublesome banks and brokerages. That's hilarious, because the banks, the brokerages, and the Federal Reserve are all working together. So to actually say that you're going to give more power to the Federal Reserve to tackle those pesky rabble-rousers that are causing trouble, that's a riot. That's really funny. Under the plan, the Fed would be allowed to delve into the books of banks, brokers, and insurance companies if it suspects they contain problems posing a risk to the overall financial system. Yeah, more of what I just said. The ideas were cautiously welcomed by Wall Street, but drew instant skepticism from consumers who questioned whether the Fed was the right body to sit on top of the regulatory tree. Critics pointed out that the Fed had proven ineffective in spotting warning signs of the present credit crunch. Well, they didn't fail to spot the signs. They created the very credit crunch that we're in. So this is, I don't even know what to think about this. I mean, are we really that stupid? Well, yes, the answer is yes. We as Americans are that stupid. Let's look at a poll on CNN. Should the Federal Reserve be given more power to regulate? 48% said no, 52% said yes. So more stupid people think it's a good idea to give the evil, unelectable, unaccountable Federal Reserve, unelected, by the way, more power to control our ability and our freedom. So that's wonderful. So we let our politicians put unconstitutional regulations in, and then that's the very reason for giving more unconstitutional regulations and powers to an unelected body like the Federal Reserve, a private corporation, by the way. Here's something funny. They missed the subprime mortgage crisis, said Greg Valliere, chief political strategist of the Sanford Financial Group. This is like putting Eliot Spitzer in charge of the morals division. I actually think it's more like putting a drug addict, a morphine addict, in charge of the morphine cabinet at the hospital. These people are unbelievable. Chuck Schumer has suggested that one overarching body could be more effective along the lines of Britain's powerful Financial Services Authority. And my thought to this is, are you crazy? Great Britain right now is going through the very same problem that we're going through. So their big regulatory one-size-fits-all body didn't do squat to stop the problem of what is happening in this country. Do something is the mantra as a flurry of new plans displace old ones, all aimed at fixing the mess, LA Times reports. Congressional Democrats are turning up the heat on the White House, and Republicans in Congress respond more aggressively to the mortgage crisis when lawmakers return next week from their spring recess, where they went gallivanting around the Cayman Islands, farting around and screwing off with millions and millions of dollars, and they get to come back and screw up the rest of the country. I added that part. This is actually from the Huffington Post, Danny Schlechter. I'll try, if I get around to putting the links to these articles. Paulson has studied the crisis. He studied it deeply and realized the culpability of the brokers and the banks in engineering the disaster. His solution: kick the ball over to the Federal Reserve Bank. It's a bank. Kick it over. He's enlisting the Fed foxes. This is good. He's enlisting the Fed foxes to guard the Wall Street chicken coop at risk from dangerous form of bird flu. This latest thing that's happened with the mortgage industry, with the mortgage meltdown, a lot of us have felt the crunch. A lot of the economy is feeling it right now because there's uncertainty, there's fear, and when there's fear, there's panic, and everyone's freaking out, so they're looking to the Federal Reserve to fix the problem. When, oops, the Federal Reserve is the problem. The Federal Reserve has no accountability whatsoever. And I've got a clip here. I want you to see the smirk on Bernanke's face when he's being grilled by Congressman Ron Paul.
Domestic price growth, and as I talked about today, and I think you would agree that we do see risks to inflation, and we are taking those into account, and we want to make sure that prices remain as stable as possible in the United States.
But how can you do this and pursue this, the policy you have, without further weakening the dollar? There's a dollar crisis out there, and people's money is being stolen. People who have saved, they're being robbed. I mean, if you have a devaluation of the dollar at 10%, people have been robbed of 10%. But how can you pursue this policy without addressing the subject that somebody's losing their wealth because of a weaker dollar, and it's going to lead to higher interest rates and a weaker economy?
If somebody has their wealth in dollars and they're going to buy consumer goods in dollars, and it's a typical American, then the decline in the dollar, the only effect it has on their buying power is it makes imported goods more expensive.
Yeah, but not if you're retired and elderly and you have CDs and their cost of living is going up no matter what your CPI says. Their cost of living is going up and they're hurting, and that's why the people in this country are very upset.
So there you have it. They don't care what you think. They don't care what our representatives think. The few, I would say, I can count them on both these hands, the 10 that we might actually have that really represent us. And they don't care what you think. They don't care what they think. They have been, since 1913 and before that, systematically working to destroy this country and get as much money as they can. Greed, 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 greed. Here's what I want you to do. We've got something coming up on April 15th called the Great American Strike. It's a protest against the IRS, and it's a protest against the Federal Reserve. Get up off your butt and do something. On April 15th, don't go to work. If you can, take an unpaid day off, and you won't be paying taxes on that day. If you have the ability and you're not too lazy, pull all your money out of the bank and watch them freak out. Send a message to the Federal Reserve that you are not their slave, that you are not their property, that you are not a piece of collateral for the debts that they are creating for this world. Who do we owe the money to? This country is over almost $10 trillion in debt. And if you bring it out towards where we look at the interest, how are we ever going to pay it off? How are my kids ever going to pay it off? And frankly, we didn't authorize this debt. I don't elect somebody, check yes, I'll vote for this person. I don't vote for them and give away my rights. I send them to represent me. But it doesn't mean I give away my rights and say, well, golly gee, I guess I'm a lot in debt now. So do something. April 15th. It's a strike day. If you can't make it to D.C., then there's plenty of local stuff going on. Go to taxday08.com. If you want to check out more about the stuff that I'm working on and that we're doing here, go to sendarope.com, and you can go to myspace.com/sendarope and get connected there and get a lot of good information. Remember, live free, America, and send a rope.